So I determined to shift my diet to
eating when offered, and fruit only the rest of the time. I mean, if there's something to be cleared up, not just wasted and put in the bin, well, that's different. So, shifting gear, awareness of God, but certainly not a pushing of his hand by an extreme fast. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm sure at times it's right to fast, but you don't do it lightly, and you don't want to push God's hand. If you needed to push yourself on some spiritual quest, if you think of Jesus in the wilderness, he'd just been anointed for his ministry by John the Baptist in the story, and he wanted to single-mindedly be very clear on the path, the ministry ahead, and it was a very extreme situation in that if you look at the temptations, they aim at the renunciation of the all the worldly material preoccupations that would keep one from doing God's will and loving him. So utterly major is the drift of the whole teaching, isn't it? And sure, you can push God on any particular issue as well, but beware of what you desire. You will have it, possibly not bringing quite the future you anticipate and quite what you hoped for, and at considerable cost, of course. And really, you could argue that was the Christian story, that Jesus did have the ministry single-mindedly, and in his lifetime, enormous difficulty. The whole point about crucifixion is it's the most awful thing in human terms to suffer in the physical, in the world, so to speak. Though strictly speaking, you could say it was associated with the statement of Jesus, my God, why have you forsaken me?" Now you could just say, it's the apparent, and it's a recitation of one of the Psalms, of course. But otherwise it's the ultimate despair, isn't it? All that suffering and not feeling the presence of God at that moment. which is so much of what secular man suffers from, of course. So he does even that so that as an empathy to all of us in the world that might suffer without believing in him, without believing in God. The Christian story of all religions is extraordinarily weighted on suffering. You would think that would make it a non-starter religion with mankind, who are not keen on suffering at all. But it hasn't. It's majored on martyrdom and suffering. And the Judaic religions have majored on autocratic, authoritarian structures, an extreme narrowness on freedom, tremendous emphasis on submission, managed to avoid Christianity as a literal sacrifice, but tremendous emphasis on sacrificial approach to living. Sacrificial giving, if you like. In short, it's emphasised a compliance which has been extremely convenient for the state to foster and steer and manipulate. It's a religion that appealed to a totally autocratic, frightening Roman emperor. And I'm certain that the state has influenced the development of the religion accordingly. Both its doctrine and its practice, its structure and its position in the state, in society. In short, it's given religion an extremely bad name, to the extent that citizens under its spell are fearful of seeking any true spirituality at all, and such is dismissed as New Age or rubbish or downright dangerous and hazardous and to be avoided and to be mocked, of course. All worldly societies, of course, to some extent resist anything that's not of their own culture, other religions in particular. But the Judaic ones are fearfully strong in this regard. True spirituality is not taking a dominance line over others, nor a crushing will on one's own part in order to be, in some sense, enlightened or earnest. But rather, spirituality is a simple longing for goodness and love, loving kindness, compassion, care, all the features that we associate with God, God's values. And we're drawn to that. We're not fearfully crusading for such. We simply abide in those values. Are we here to change the world? Here we are, but not by some crusade, rather by a kindly being, a loving presence of God in us and in our awareness. that we transform the situation accordingly by the love of God, both for God and God's love for us. The kingdom of heaven is not taken by storm, it's not taken by violence, great suffering, any more than a loving relationship between two people is taken by force. Would be a mockery, nonsense. Kindness is an offer, not a burden. Love is given, offered, not forced upon or pressed. We rescue, we do not seize. It's not guilt that validates the love of God. It's a love of what God is and values that draws us. It's not a mindfulness of what we're doing wrong. It's an awareness of what to do right, for joy and peace and happiness and goodness and blessing. I am not warring against evil. I'm embracing the presence, the awareness of God. And that transforms everything miraculously. Thank you, Heavenly Father.
So we expect a person that's got it right, spiritually speaking, is basically at peace, not overcome by fears or stress, not really given to a torrent of words, not wrestling with God, forcing the issue, but rather so aware of his presence that there's scarcely need to suggest what is wanted. And what is wanted seems to pale in significance compared to the conviction that God's going to do what is best and is doing what's best. So in that sense, we've not come to change the classroom. I'm not demanding that the lesson be different. Take this away and put this in. I'm accepting in a way that the lesson is right. The change is that I now see it as right. Does this mean I'm complacent about evil? Not really. I'm doing what is right in the circumstance, which is to pursue good and avoid evil, and to encourage good and to discourage bad. But I don't have to discourage the bad very much. The bad teaches itself. So if someone has an illness and they're suffering from cancer, for argument's sake, well, before you cast out the spirit or, heal the cancer, it would be more reasonable to say, well, is there anything you're doing that's stopping the body heal itself? Are you stressed? What are you concerned about and why? Can we do anything about that? Is there something physically you're doing wrong? You're in a polluted environment, or your diet so obviously is destroying your immune system, or not giving it the support that the immune system needs, as regards, fresh fruit, shouldn't we put those things right? Is there something perhaps that you're doing wrong spiritually that you know of? I mean, physically, might be alcohol, drugs, indulgence in sexual activity that's not good for you. I don't mean that all sexual activity is forbidden. I'm just saying there's clearly some that are probably not a good idea at all. Are you, for instance, knowingly committing adultery or being unfaithful in some way? Can you put that right? Might that have nothing to do with the cancer that you're suffering from? Well, it might have nothing to do with it, but it might. Try and see. And when you've searched around and basically had a reassessment of your way of living and so on, and put things right, and if still you're not getting the healing that you want, well, ask. But probably not best to insist, not to keep pressing. Yes, he will give way if you keep pressing, but it may not be for the best, except in as far as he wants to respond when you really cry out. You put him in a fix where he's going to have to find another way of putting right whatever's wrong. Now, we could have come to the conclusion, well, there's nothing wrong. Not as far as I can see anyway. But I'm still suffering from the cancer. Right. In which case, this is the opportunity of a lifetime to trust God. How do you do that? Well, you review the fact that he's an all-powerful God, or extremely powerful and able at least. And he loves you. And therefore, what he's allowing in your life is for a blessing. So you're going to thank him for it, which is an active, physical active way of acting out trust and faith in him. That he's got it right and he's going to do whatever's best. And you're going to run with it because you love and you trust him. And this is your opportunity to show just how much you do trust him. So you thank God every time you feel the pain. You thank God. Every time it gets just too bad, thank God all the more. Now, this is a great insurance policy, because if it really were a satanic attack, the last thing evil would want is to be doing something that constantly draws your mind to God. So, from evil's point of view, it's best to stop tormenting you. Well, I'm not sure if that's a valid reality, that evil has access to your person anyway. I think the whole point of turning your life over to God and trusting him and loving him is that God forgives, rescues, and protects. And if you read John 17, you'll know that we're kept from the evil. So, we have this extraordinary thing of Paul, that whatever circumstance he finds himself in, he is content. You can't be content if you're not trusting, can you? Must be an astonishing trust in God to be content in all circumstances. Right. So the text is, trust in the Lord with all thine strength and lean not unto thine own understanding. And we can actively do that by thanking God. And of course being vigilant in searching out if there's any wrong thing in us that we should be battling with and turning it over to God. We may not actually overcome the difficulty, but we are confronting it, giving it to God, and doing what we can. We may still be failing, but because we put the situation in God's hands, we are protected from all evil. In a sense, I think we're protected from evils anyway, in that we're only subject to, whether you're following God or not, that which God determines to be for the best. In what sense is it evil then? Well, it's possibly evil in that it's malevolent also from the being that's causing the evil, be that spirit or person. But that God is using it for good, the circumstance. The understanding is that God is master of the entire classroom, and therefore we trust Him. We are not fundamentally at risk, because He is able, and He will bring us through. But there are shortcuts. I mean, listening to true wisdom and godly advice no doubt helps, if it is truly godly. Loving God, being aware of His presence always. Thanking God for all that you can and possibly all that you suffer from as well. Taking care to do that which you know brings life and health and joy and blessing. Avoiding evil. Anything that you understand to be evil, shying away from, avoiding. So we're talking about a life that's not characterized by crowding, stress, worry, exhaustion, agitation, violent behavior, outbreaks of behavior that doesn't really seem godly in itself at all. So you can tell a preacher that is not really in tune with God, and therefore what he's advising could well be quite wide of the mark, so to speak, quite in error. Doesn't mean to say you don't see signs and wonders, but that's not necessarily it's not necessarily the case that that means the person is right, or even in the right. Simply that they have tapped an ability to achieve miracles. Miracles that might seem ostensibly necessarily good. I'm healing people, aren't I? Didn't Jesus heal people? But of course, on a biblical point of view, so did Pharaoh's magicians. That didn't make them godly. Didn't imply that they were necessarily godly at all, far from it. In short, power is not the proof of God, but creative, loving kindness. That is the hallmark of our God. There are many other qualities of God too, and we know them all, like, wisdom, faithfulness, forgiveness, joy and peace. But power can be a blessing or explosively dangerous, can't it? It can be used for peace or used for war. It is not in itself reliable confirmation of godliness. I may have the power to make a magnificent machine of great complexity and engineering and technology and so on, but it's used to destroy people. So you could say power is in itself neutral. It depends on the motive behind it. After all, even peaceful reaction can be wrong in some circumstances, where it turns a blind eye to something that needs to be done and dealt with. Joy too can be in wrong circumstances, can't it? You might be joyful just because you're under influence of alcohol or drugs, or even because you're enjoying someone else's suffering. Even apparent acts of love, of course, can be to exploit, to deceive and so on. So we seek out that which is loving and kind and genuinely so. And with experience we get better at doing this, more able, and blessed accordingly. In general, dominant behaviour, authoritarian approaches, legalism, noise, shouting, unkindness, what seems to be unkind words, coarseness, vulgarity, lasciviousness, indulgent behaviour. All give us some clues as to the reality, doesn't it? And we become more able to understand what is truly good and what isn't as time goes by. Thank you, Heavenly Father.